And good afternoon to everyone. I'm very happy to be here again and to be talking to you today about auctioning of emission allowances under the EU ETS. Maybe a few words on me very quickly. So my name is Eva Ganev. I'm from Bulgaria originally, working in Brussels. Nowadays, a little bit complicated, as you may know, but we manage, however. And I'm working more specifically on energy and climate-related policies at the European level for a European Trade Association. So let's start. What is the subject for today? What is that we are going to be talking about? I will introduce very shortly the EU ETS scheme, so the European Union's emissions trading scheme, which is actually hosting our topic about auctioning. It will be a very short introduction, since there is also a course on the Leonardo Academy, which is more directly addressing this introduction to the European ETS scheme. Then we will tackle the principles of auctioning. And of course, we have to go through some technical provisions in order to explain how auctioning works in practice. And we'll close the session with some perspectives from European level as well as international level. So let's enter the topic right now for the introduction. So as I said, we are dealing here with the European Union's emissions trading scheme, the EU ETS. What is this? This is, in a nutshell, just the cornerstone of European Union's climate policy. It is what is considered to be the main decarbonization instrument in the European Union. You probably know that we are evolving under a framework which is covering us until 2050 with the objective of an almost full decarbonization, as contained in the low carbon economy roadmap published by the European Commission in 2011. The principle of the EU ETS is to put a price on carbon. There have been quite a lot of discussions in the 90s on how to try to tackle climate change, which appeared then as a really important challenge. And the choice was made to use the so-called cap and trade scheme, which is basically putting a price on carbon. But more precisely, what we are dealing with under the EU ETS is with the objective to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and with the objective to give incentives to improve technologies, to have more low carbon technologies, we have chosen, as I said, this cap and trade scheme. Basically, there's a cap, or a limit on emissions, which is declining every year. And within this cap, under this cap, within this limit, the operators are allowed to trade emission allowances. And so this is the core. How do we trade emission allowances under the EU ETS? Of course, very logically, the carbon price is determined through the balance of supply and demand on this carbon market. So the EU ETS is quite large, and this is important to notice because it covers almost half of European Union's emissions. And so you can imagine that auctioning is going to be quite important for European economy as a whole, because it will have also financial and economical impacts in the European Union. But so we have this carbon market. And under this carbon market, we have to trade EU allowances. This is called EUAs. What is an EU allowances? It is the right to emit 1 ton of CO2 equivalent. And of course, all of these allowances on the market have a price. But how to determine who receives how many allowances, how to determine who buys how many allowances, this is the allocation issue. We have to allocate allowances. And therefore, the European Commission has reflected for quite a long time and has come with the proposal to have a default allocation method. So the principle here is auctioning. There were different discussions on different options, benchmarking, etc., but the principle is now auctioning, so we are trading these allowances on the EU carbon markets. In practice, this means that every year the participants on the market, the different operators, are reporting their emissions, and they have to be able to cover these emissions by these allowances. So, of course, if a participant does not have enough allowances, he can either reduce his emissions, and this is the second part of the double objective of the EU ETS, or he can, if he cannot reduce his emissions, buy more allowances on the markets. There is a notable exception which has been declining over the years, but which still is quite important at EU level. It is free allocation. Of course, the default allocation method is auctioning, so in principle, everyone has to buy and to pay for the allowances, to pay for the right to emit. But there is an exception for some sectors which are deemed exposed to what we call a high risk of carbon leakage, which means in practice that these sectors are subject to high international competition and risk moving abroad outside of the EU if the cost impact of the EU ETS is too high on them. So to protect their global competitiveness, the European legislation has come with a solution to grant them a free allocation. So it is a certain amount of allowance. See that on this graph on screen, you can see the repartition of free allocation, so free allowances received by a certain number of industries in Europe, which is in blue, versus auctioning. And this is for the trading period that we are currently in, which is called Phase 3 under the EU ETS, and which covers the years from 2013 to 2020. So for the first 3 years in this period, you can see the repartition, and you can already observe here that the free allocation part for the allowances is slightly decreasing. This is the cap logic under the EU ETS, and this is the political choice made at European level. So auctioning is really the principle, and the share of auctioning is still to increase. So I talked to you about Phase 3 of the EU ETS, but let's come back for a second on the evolution of the EU ETS along the way. We are indeed in the third phase, but actually the EU ETS has started in 2005, and it has started through a first short phase of learning by doing. Auctioning there was quite a minority, because only 5% of allowances were to be auctioned. Learning by doing meant that the European Commission basically distributed allowances through free allocation to the operators already covered by the EU ETS, for them to try to understand how the system functions, to try to assess the impacts, and to try to indeed learn by doing. This share of auctioned allocations increased in the second phase, which was from 2008 to 2012, when the ETS got enlarged beyond the borders of the EU to the so-called European economy area, so basically Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein, and also enlarged to aviation. And then we got, in principle, 10% of auctioned allocation. But you will notice that this is also the phase under which took place the economic crisis, and actually in reality only 4% of the allowances were auctioned. And based on the allocation principles and based on the free allocation volumes that that most of the operators received. They received in practice more allowances than they needed. Because most of the industries, for instance, had to reduce their capacities because of the economic crisis, and so only a very small share of allowances really were auctioned. So now we are in the EU ETS phase 3, which is covering the years from 2013 to 2020. And this is now the real stuff. So we have the EU-wide cap on emissions, and as you could see in the previous graph, more than 50% of allowances are auctioned, and this share is due to increase. So let's turn now to the principles of auctioning, starting, of course, with the legislation. So what are the rules in place in the European Union? Of course, we are under the empire of the EU ETS directive from 2003. It has been amended several times. The last reform was adopted in 2009, and last year the European Commission put on the table a proposal for a new reform. And this reform will cover the phase 4 of the EU ETS, going from 2021 to 2030. I will say a few words on this issue under the part on perspective at the end of this presentation. So, under the EU ETS directive, the article which is covering the issue of auctioning is Article 10. It is a quite long article with different provisions, but the main principle there is that the member states are obliged to auction all allowances which are not allocated for free. So the principle here of auctioning is inscribed in the ETS directive. You will have noticed that the member states shall auction. So member states are very, very important actors in this context. But so the EU ETS directive gives the main principle, but there's also an auctioning regulation, which was actually not adopted straight away in 2003, but adopted before the beginning of the third phase of the EU ETS, which we are under right now, to try to regulate more precisely this issue of auctioning. And it contains different rules on the definition of auctioning, the timing, the administration, and all other aspects. And more specifically, it is interesting to have a look at the Chapter 3 of this auctioning regulation, which gives the annual volumes of allowances to be auctioned, and also other more precise details about how auctioning should take place. So the principle here is that the European Commission has determined in the legislation what are the volumes of allowances to be auctioned. And here we are again recalling of the cap of the EU ETS, the cap we are under. And we know that the global number, the total number of allowances of EUAs on the European carbon markets is being reduced every year, and that the share of auctioning is being increased under this cap. So the detailed figures are in this auctioning regulation. I talked a little bit about the member states. I would like to come back on this issue in a little bit more detail, because, as we said, allowances are distributed among the member states. This means that the property of the legal property of the allowances goes into the hands of member states, and each member state has to ensure that its share of allowances is being auctioned, at least its auctioning share of allowances. Of course, there had to be distribution rules, how to share these allowances to be auctioned among the member states. And the principle is that the major part, 88% of these allowances, are distributed on the basis of the historical share of verified emissions of each member state in the EU. So depending on how much emissions they have been responsible for, either in the year 2005 or on the basis of the average of the period 2005-2007, the member states receive a different share of allowances to be auctioned. There is also 10% of allowances to be auctioned, which are in a kind of reserve for member states for solidarity and growth. Basically, these are the member states that have joined the EU lately in the process, which have less rich economies, and therefore for this solidarity purpose and the growth of their economies, they receive a little bit more of allowances. And under phase 3, we also have a so-called bonus for the member states, which are the best students in class with regard to the implementation of the Kyoto Protocol. So those who do best receive also a share of 2% of the remaining allowances to be auctioned. I'm talking about political acceptance here with regards to member states. Looking back to the process of adoption of legislation at the European level, you most probably know that the member states gathering under the Council have a very important role to play. They are co-legislators in the European Union. So when designing the EU ETS directive, and especially when designing this phase 3 rules, the European Commission had to think about what could be politically acceptable for the member states. And what is linked, as I said in the introduction, to these auctions allowances is also a quite important financial impact. And basically, these allowances that are being auctioned are main revenues for the member states. And of course, you can imagine what kind of debates can take place among the member states when it comes to this kind of so-called burden sharing. So member states are important actors under the issue of auctioning under the EU ETS. But of course, the main actors are basically the operators that are going to have to auction allowances, to buy allowances or to sell allowances on the market. If we look back to the sectors that are covered by the EU ETS directive, we see basically two main categories. The first one is the power industry. This is quite straightforward. And the second one is manufacturing industry. And actually under this category, we also add now aviation. Aviation is not for the moment fully part of the EU ETS, but it is also becoming part of this. So manufacturing industries, basically they are energy intensive industries, for instance the iron and steel sector, cement sector, paper sector, etc., etc. If we have a look on what is the share of greenhouse gas emissions per sector in the European Union, actually what was the case in 2012, you can quite clearly see that the energy sector is the most important emitter in the EU, and actually the picture around the world is globally quite the same. So this explains why the European Commission, when designing the rules for phase 3, so from 2013 onwards, decided that the power sector would have to be covered by auctioning only. So there is no free allocation for the power sector under the EU ETS right now in phase 3. Of course, as I said before, it was the case to try to learn by doing before, but now it's not the case anymore. So as we said, it holds the largest share of emissions under the EU ETS, but this is not the only reason why this proposal was put forward. Actually, it has been found that the power sector is able to pass through its carbon costs. So the costs of auctioning under the EU ETS is actually translated in the energy price when energy is being sold to energy consumers. And this has given rise to what we call the big discussion on the windfall profits that the power sector is deemed to have benefited from in previous phases. So to avoid this, there is the principle of 100% auctioning right now. We are also often talking under the ETS about indirect emissions. So just a short word on this one. This is actually the emissions which are emitted when producing energy and which are also borne by, for instance, industrial consumers. So under certain rules, they are allowed to receive a certain kind of compensation, at least under the European rules. But of course, to every rule, there's an exception. So power sector is covered by auctioning up to 100%. But as we said, we need to modernize the power sector in some member states, so the newcomers basically in the EU. And until 2019, they have a kind of transitional period which is allowing them to receive, however, a certain number of allowances to help them modernize their sector. The second category of sectors covered by the EU ETS are the manufacturing sectors, and there they have a share of reallocation up to a certain level, as we said before, to protect their global competitiveness, but the rest of their emissions has to be auctioned. And as we also said before, this share of auctioning is increasing over time. But in practice, the European auctioning market is not extremely large for the moment. It is bracing large amounts of finances, but there are not a huge number of operators, so to say, very active on the market right now. So let's recall this graph that we already saw at the beginning. You can see already here that the share of auctioning versus reallocation is increasing during phase 3. And actually it is deemed to continue like that because reallocation is only a transitional measure. It is the exception. It is not the rule. So let's look into the more technical provisions, how auctioning works in practice. Of course, we have to have an auction platform where the different operators are allowed to bid. In phase 3, in the phase that we are in right now, we have the principle of a common auction platform. So this is the European platform. However, when the Commission proposed this, not all member states agreed, as usual, and actually currently only 25, so the large majority of member states are using it. There are 3 countries that chose to opt out, Germany, the UK, and Poland. And later on, the countries covered by the European Economic Area also joined this common platform. So in practice, 2 platforms are in place, the European Energy Exchange in Leipzig, the EEX, which is the common auction platform, and for the UK, there's the ICE in London. I think that the persons in the UK are quite keen to keep their financial transactions at home. So to look at a little bit more into details, the EEX was selected through a procurement procedure by the European Commission, and the current contract runs until the summer of this year, so there's going to be maybe some change soon, but the Commission has not made any specific announcements on this one, so it is also possible that this contract will continue. The EEX is, and this is interesting, open to buyers anywhere in the EU and in the EEA. And actually, it's of course open to ETS operators or to anyone that is holding an authorization. So basically, if you want to go and buy or sell allowances, you can do that if you are under the EU ETS or if you hold an authorization. And this is quite a big issue under the auctioning rules. There are many financial institutions which indeed have experience in auctioning that are also active on the carbon markets. And I will also come back to this in a few minutes. And so we said that Germany, Poland, and the UK opted out from this common auctioning platform, but in practice, Germany and Poland, under some specific rules, use the same platforms. So this is only the UK that is using another platform, the IC in London. In practice, the auctions take place through the internet, so it doesn't look like Wall Street at all. This is completely different. You are at your office. You just enter the platform, and you start bidding depending on the amount of allowances that you need and on the price that you're willing to purchase them at. The calendars are published by the platforms. Classically, there are 3 auctioning rounds taking place per week on the EEX. Of course, the auctions are based on the volume of allowances that can be auctioned by each and every member state. And every member state has appointed an auctioneer that is kind of selling these allowances on the common auction platforms. For this year, we are talking at about 700 million of allowances, and they are always sold by lots of at least 500 allowances. So the auctioning regulation of 2010 also said that an independent monitor for these auction platforms has to be appointed, but the European Commission has had a hard time doing this, and it is not done yet. There was the first attempt in 2012, and another one in 2013, and since then the European Commission is still assessing how to comply with the auctioning regulation on this issue. A few words on the auction format. So no, it is definitely not Wall Street, but actually it looks like every classical auctioning platform. There's a single round bid and there's an uniform price per auction. Quite classically, the bidders can place the number of bids, saying that they want X number of allowances and that they are ready to pay price Y for these allowances. And after the bids are over, the platform determines the clearing price, and this is the uniform, the same price for everyone. This is quite interesting to bear in mind. To know what is happening with the different allowances that are auctioned, the European Commission has put in place a union registry. So this is a regulation dated of 2013. You maybe know that under the EU ETS, the reporting of the different emissions is happening at plant level, at its station level, and so of course is the registry of the different allowances. This is a single registry for the European Union, and here again the European Commission is quite active because it is operating the registry. But of course, in every member state that is covered by the EU ETS, there is also an administrator, so a kind of contact point for operators at national level. This is a web-based application, and it's actually open to everyone to see on the website of the European Commission of DG Climate Action, to be more precise. So we have the registry, but we also have to check what is happening with these allowances in practice. So we also have rules at European level for monitoring, reporting, and verification. These rules have been adopted in 2012, and there's under these regulations an obligation to monitor, report, and verify the fate of these different allowances under the EU ETS. So there is a series of obligations on the plans, so on different industries, and collection at national level, then transferred to European level. Actually, each installation has the obligation to report its allowances, also to go through some verification procedures. And of course, there are sanctions for non-compliance, and there have been some in the past because there has been some abuse and some frauds already caught on the carbon markets in the European Union. So this is probably why the European Commission has also come forward with market oversight rules. We have a kind of issue with the legal nature of what is an European Union emission allowances, because there is no real definition of EUAs at EU level. So we know that the allowances to be auctioned may or may not be a financial instrument, depending on the different rules and legislation. But actually, the majority of the transactions are under the form of different derivatives on the carbon market, and so automatically they fall under the European Union's rules for financial markets. But there has been also additional legislation adopted, and it also applies to EUAs. So first of all, this is the Market Abuse Directive of 2003, and of course its provisions apply to all the bidders that are auctioning allowances, that are active in the auctioning of allowances, and of course there's a quite classical rules to avoid market abuse, insider trading, etc. And also 2 years ago, in 2014, the Markets in Financial Instruments Directive was adopted, and it's currently being reviewed, which means that in the future, actually from January next year, all the emission allowances will be classified as financial instruments. So although the definition has not been cleared, it is going to be sure that the rules, the provisions contained in this so-called MiFID directive are going to apply to EUAs, and this is of course classical market regulation to avoid abuse, to avoid frauds. And this is also very important since, as we said before, many financial institutions are quite active on the carbon market. So that the Commission is quite active. Actually, it's also active on the auctioning issue through the so-called NER 300 program. NER stands for New Entrants Reserve, and 300 stands for the number of allowances in millions that are put in this reserve. Basically, if there are new entrants in the EU ETS, they are entitled to allowances under this reserve. But until that happens, this reserve is also used for innovation purposes. So this is a kind of program which is promoting new technologies, low carbon technologies, and it's basically is aimed at stimulating demonstration programs for renewable energies and for carbon capture and storage, also known as CCS. Here the Commission received the help of the European Investment Bank, and actually this NER 300 program has already gathered around 2 billion euros to support these low carbon technologies. But interestingly enough, if the NER 300 allowances are not sold, are not auctioned, they are to be distributed again among the member states. So they may receive a little bit more of allowances to be auctioned. Coming to the member states, once again, the ETS directive in its Article 10.3 is actually guiding the member states with regards to what they should do with the revenues from auctioning. So member states are actually receiving a certain amount of revenues from the auctioning for their budgets. But the ETS directive says that at least 50% of these revenues should, so it's not an obligation, but it's an invitation to use these revenues for climate and energy-related purposes. So if we look at some figures, for instance, in the first year of phase 3, so in 2013, the total revenues for the EU from the EU ETS reached 3.6 billion euros. So this is quite an important amount. And the revenues generated from the auctions between 2012 and mid-2015 are almost 9 billion euros. So these are the revenues for all the member states in the European Union from the auctions under the EU ETS. And as you can see, even if you share it among the 31 states that are covered by the EU ETS, it's quite an important amount. The member states are obliged, as we said before, to report what is happening with the allowances. So the different operators on the market and installations have to report at national level, and the member states report at European level. And they have reported for the European carbon market report published in November last year that they have used 87% of their revenues in the same period, so in 2012-2015, for climate and energy-related purposes. But actually, it is not defined what climate and energy-related purposes are, and it is sometimes a little bit complicated to know what kind of understanding the member states could have about this provision of the EU ETS directive. So, if we take a look at some figures, some more concrete figures about what the EU auction market looks like in practice, you have here on the left side the volume in millions of tons of the market, with figures from 2014, 2015, and forecasts from 2016 until 2018. And on the right hand, you have the market value in millions of euros, with also already reported and verified data for 2014 and 2015, and a forecast for this year. What we can observe is that the auctioning share in blue on both graphs is increasing over time, but this is not the favorite means of exchanging allowances at the moment, because the red part is the exchange traded between the operators. This is probably going to change in the future, but it's quite interesting to note that this is the case right now. So, for instance, in 2014, this exchange traded among the different operators under the EU ETS amounted to 5,700,000,000 tons. In 2014, it has a little bit decreased in the subsequent years. Aviation, of course, has still a very small share. This is on the right-hand side of each of the graphs. It remains really quite small, but as I said, the auctioning share also remains limited. So it was a little bit more than 500 million tons in 2014, and growing, expected at least to grow at almost 950 million tons in 2018. But what about the value? Again, we saw quite important figures a few minutes ago about the revenues that are received by the member states. Of course, this means in return a high cost for the operators under the EU ETS that have to purchase these allowances through bids or through exchange. And logically, the exchange traded EUAs is again the highest share here. For instance, in 2014, it was almost 35 billion of euros. We can see on the graph that it decreased slightly to 30 million euros in 2015. But this year, it's expected to increase again and actually go beyond the figure of 2014. So this year in 2016, we should have around 37 billion of euros of exchange traded of EUAs. And of course, the auctioning part is a little bit smaller, but it is expected this year to be almost 7 billion euros. So you can see that this is quite a high amount. Let's now look quickly at some perspectives for the future of auctioning under the EU ETS and also beyond the EU ETS. As I said in the introduction, the carbon price is a central issue to the success of the EU ETS, at least in the way that the EU ETS is designed right now. It is covered with a lot of expectations, and it has to, at the same time, reduce emissions because it is costly to emit greenhouse gases, but also to support low carbon investments because these carbon revenues are supposed to be reinvested either through industries willing to reduce their emissions or through, for instance, support to renewable energies. So there are different logics between European legislators and European actors and the EU ETS as a whole with regard to this carbon price. The European Commission's logic, of course, this is very schematic, but it is basically that a higher carbon price is needed to stimulate low carbon investments and, of course, to reduce emissions. The European Parliament, of course, logically supports this, and they are at the moment quite focused also on energy efficiency. So this is also a stimulus for them to say that if the carbon costs is impacting highly the energy costs, then the actors would be incentivized to reduce their energy consumption through the means that they can do this, of course. And the member states' logic is very much also beyond the highest common interest, also very much led by the revenues part of this, the revenues aspect of this whole auctioning issue, especially in economic crisis periods. On the other hand, of course, for the operators that have to purchase EUAs, it is a high cost. But let's look at the carbon price evolution since the beginning of the EU ETS in 2005, and this is not a surprise for you that the carbon price has really plummeted over the years. I again looked it up this morning, and it is below 5 euros, when the European Commission expected it to be around 30 euros right now. So this is a kind of problem under the EU ETS, and this had to be fixed in some way. But actually, this is not the only challenge faced by the EU ETS. The system is not very flexible. As we said, allocation of allowances takes place on the basis of historical emissions. But when we had a huge drop due to the financial and economic crisis, the EU ETS could not really adapt. So we have a kind of surplus of allowances, supply highly exceeding demand, meaning that carbon prices are low, and it explains the previous graph. And also the certain persons at least believe that the credibility of the system has been harmed, and this is very much reflected also on the auctioning part of the European allowances. So the European Commission came with some solutions, and 3 years ago there was a temporary, at least at the time, measure that has been adopted, which was the so-called backloading decision to postpone the auctioning of a number of allowances from the beginning of the third trading period until the end of the third trading period, to allow demand to pick up and to allow prices to increase at least at the beginning of the trading period. But this was not the end of it, because a few months ago there was also another decision adopted, the so-called market stability reserve, which is actually a more structural measure, and which made backloading definitive, because it puts in place a reserve which is basically adjusting the supply of allowances on the market to be auctioned. So there are different thresholds, and if the market is deemed oversupplied, these allowances are taken away from the market, put into the market stability reserve, in order to achieve more balance between supply and demand, and to achieve higher prices. So this decision was adopted at the end of last year. This reserve should be active, operational from 2019. But 2 months ago, Poland challenged this decision in the in front of the Court of the European Union. So let's see if something comes out of that and modifies this decision. Another crucial issue is that we have, as I said before, on the table a new proposal for a review of the EU ETS directive, actually for the next trading period, so phase 4 from 2021 to 2030. This proposal was published by the Commission in July last year, and there is something new. Among other things, in this text, it is a fixed auctioning share. Actually, the European Council gathered in October 2014 and recommended that we have a fixed auctioning share of allowances in the future. So this means that 57%, at least for the proposal, of allowances on the European carbon market are going to be auctioned, and then what remains is distributed, but basically free allocation to industry is limited. Of course, what is free does not help increase the carbon price, does not help bring more revenues to the member states, and does not help in this logic incentivize reduction of emissions and investments in low carbon technologies. So if you look at the little picture in this slide, you can see that the red part, so the more than 7 billion EUAs in their phase 4, will be auctioned, at least if the proposal passes as such. And there is also an expected amendment of the auctioning regulation. So the legislative process on this proposal is ongoing. The new scheme, at least for phase 4, is expected to be adopted somewhere next year if everything goes smoothly, and of course it will be operational from 2021. But some changes are coming here. And then if we look at the international level, the main question, I believe, is, are we heading to a global carbon market? If you look at this picture, what is in light green is the emissions trading schemes either implemented or scheduled for implementation. And if you take a look at the picture, so we have this ETS in Europe. There is also something that has been put in place in Kazakhstan. There are pilot projects in China. There is evolution in Republic of Korea. There are also 2 pilots in Japan. And then there is some evolution also in Northern America. Of course, we know about the Quebec ETS, which is quite well functioning. Californian one as well. Alberta is a little bit newer, and then we have New Zealand. We almost had something in Australia a few years ago, but due to political change there, it didn't work. But maybe it is going to evolve again in the future. But basically what we can conclude from this picture is that we are not, we don't have harmonization at global level for the moment. So what can we do with our own EU ETS? And if we look at this into the perspective of the Paris Convention and the Paris Agreement in December of last year, we know that the goal is to aim at a global carbon market. You can conclude from the picture that it's not going to be here very soon, because there's a huge disparity among the instruments. It is not only the fact that we don't have ETS-like systems around the world to try to link together to have a global market. We also have different types of measures around the world. So it is, at the moment, at least looking a little bit complicated. But if we look at the other ETS-like systems, actually the Quebec one is the most similar, because there is also full auctioning for the power sector, of course, also with exceptions, but the principle is very similar to the EU ETS. Under the Californian ETS, which is often taken as example by the European Commission, we can see that there's only around 10% of allowances that are being auctioned. If we look at Korea, we have 3% of auctioning. And if we look at the Chinese pilots and even if we look at the Chinese announcements to have a pan-Chinese ETS as from next year, they are mainly based on free allocation. So auctioning is not, at least not yet, the principle there. So what the European Commission today considers as a possible first step to a global carbon market one day is to have linkages between the different systems. But again, you can see that there are not many systems around the world that are really similar to the EU ETS. So with this, I would like to thank you and to try at least to answer the best I can to your questions.